All the playing stopped in the playground now. She wants to play with the toys a while. And school's out early, and soon we be learning. And the lesson today is how to die. And then the bullhorn crackles, and the captain tackles, with the problems and the hows and the whys. And he can see no reasons, 'cause there are no reasons. What reason do you need to die? That is a sampling of the lyrics from I Don't Like Mondays by the Boomtown Rats that was written when Bob Geldof, the lead singer, read about the school shooting that we're about to talk about this week. The shooter never truly gave full reasoning for why she chose to open fire on January 29th of 1979, but in the moment, she told a reporter that she did it because she didn't like Mondays and she felt like adding some excitement to the day. The song would be a #1 hit in the United Kingdom for 4 weeks, but did not hit the top 40 in the US. Hello, my name is Lance, and this week I am lucky enough to have Bailey with me again in the co-host chair. Welcome to the landmark 150th episode of Gone But Never Forgotten, the Grover Cleveland Elementary School shooting. Well, first and foremost, Bailey, welcome back to another episode of Gone But Never Forgotten. The listeners like you, and they like having that second voice on the show, and I cannot think of anyone that I would rather have here doing it with me.
Hey Goners, I think it's safe to say that you'll be hearing my voice at least once a month from here on out. And thank you, Lance, immensely again for sharing this with me and welcoming me to this team with such open arms. I am very honored to be a part of this landmark 150th episode, especially.
Hey, you're always welcome, you know that. And this week we've toned it down from serial killers. We've settled you into an episode on a school shooting, so we haven't left the realm of murder and mass murder. Just this time it's all in one fell swoop rather than a sustained rampage. How did you find studying for this particular case?
I will admit I'm really glad to be straying away from the mutilation of women trend that you and I have seemed to be on for the last few episodes here. But I will also admit that I found this case a little difficult to read. It's thankfully, I guess you could call it on the brighter side of the events that you've covered, because at least none of the children involved actually died. But it's still tragic and hard to read, especially being a mom myself and actively sending my child off to school while doing the research.
Yeah, it's been tough this month. I've covered quite a few school shootings. I've shared, I think on the last episode, that these have been really the hardest episodes for me that I've ever done. And for that reason, I picked September, and our kids are going back to school, and I covered 2 cases like this where it was elementary school, which is where our children are presently going. So definitely tough. So like you said, though, this one, we still have murder, but this time, thankfully, this was not about children dying. But I'll just jump right in, and we'll share this case with you. Brenda Spencer was born on April 3rd of 1962 to her parents Dorothy Nadine Spencer, better known as Dot, and Wallace Edward Spencer, better known as Wally. Dot and Wally had been married on December 12th of 1954, and Brenda would be the youngest of 3 children after her brother Scott and her sister Teresa. When Brenda was born, the family lived in Chula Vista, California, but soon after her birth, they would move to a middle-class to upper-class neighborhood located in San Carlos, California. Wally would go to work at the San Diego State University as an audio-video technician, while Dot started to take classes to work as an accountant. Wally and Dot were seen as polar opposites by those that knew them, because Wally was a soft-spoken man who was professional at work, but who was not very interested in developing many, if really any, friendships outside of the workplace. When he left work, he essentially kept to himself. Dot, on the other hand, though, was very much an extrovert. She ran her accounting business out of the family home, and she had many large clients. She also loved to golf, and she also worked for 6 months of the year as a bookkeeper for the Andy Williams San Diego Golf Tournament at Torrey Pines.
Dot got her children all involved in golf, and surprisingly, it turned out that they were all fairly proficient at it. All 3 children ranked very highly in the Junior Golf Association, and at the age of 9, Brenda competed at an incredibly high level. Brenda was also known to be a very active and very athletic person, competing not only in golf, but in soccer, softball, and bowling. It was said that Brenda was very good at sports, and she was very competitive, always wanting the recognition. Sadly, that lust for attention and recognition will come into play more as this story evolves. Neighbors remember seeing Brenda outside often, and it wasn't odd to see her outside like a typical kid, biking around, doing wheelies, or just doing whatever she could to keep herself busy outside. Brenda also absolutely adored animals, and she had many pets, including cats, dogs, rabbits, turtles, and even a pet snake. Her career aspirations were very clear from a young age. Brenda wanted to become a veterinarian.
When Brenda was 10 years old, though, things started to take a drastic change within her life. Her family had always been together, and that was about to fall apart. Dot learned that Wally had a drinking problem, and even through the court battles, she did not use that card against him. She was the only one that knew. What was the straw that broke the camel's back for Dot, though, was that she found out that Wally had been having multiple affairs behind her back. He even had the nerve to ask Dot if she would take him back if he left for a year. Dot said that she laughed in his face when he brought that up, and she filed for divorce just a few days later. Wally, though, had already decided that he was going to leave. He had already rented an apartment, and seemingly he was ready to move on or take a temporary leave from his life. The custody battle between Wally and Dot for the 3 children was said to have been brutal, even though Wally's drinking problem was seemingly never brought up. In the end, Scott and Teresa, Brenda's older siblings, said that they wanted to live with Wally, and because the judge did not want to split the siblings up, all 3 children were placed into Wally's custody with mandatory visiting rights granted to Dot.
Dot stayed in the family home by herself, while Wally would purchase a home on Lake Atlin Avenue, roughly 12 blocks from Dot's home. The home was located directly across the street from Grover Cleveland Elementary School, which Brenda attended and graduated from in 1974. She moved on from there to Patrick Henry High School. For the first couple years after the divorce, it appeared Brenda was very eager to go and visit her mom every time she could. She would often rush over to the house before Dot would get home from work, climbing the fence to play with the dogs in the yard. Brenda's maternal grandmother, Ruth, would even say that Brenda would often cry when it was time for her to leave and go back to Wally's home. Over time, though, Brenda would go to her mom's house less and less frequently, and neighbors would say that they noticed she started to become more and more of a loner, or so it seemed, and that she spent less time with others. It has been studied and hypothesized that when parents divorce when a child is very young, it can certainly strain the relationship between the child with both parents, and can even diminish the relationship entirely. Typically, this is because the custodial parent in the situation often winds up having to work twice as hard to sustain the family, and leaves less time for the children, while the non-custodial parent is more absent in the life, also causing them to spend less time with the children. This can be a drastic change to the life of a young child.
And frankly, as we will discuss more and more as we go on, I'm actually not even quite sure how interested in Brenda or any of her children that Dot was. There are many twists and turns along the way that made me go, For example, I'm not sure how you would say that a custody battle was difficult when the children ultimately made the decision, and on top of that, Dot didn't seem to fight hard because she didn't even bring up the fact to the judge that Wally had an alcohol problem.
I came across an interview, though, where Dot said that the custody battle was becoming very expensive, and quite frankly, they just didn't have the funds to proceed with a lengthy battle. Not quite sure how true that is. And ultimately, yes, the children did choose to go with their father, but did they really choose that? I feel like with everything that we just discussed, though, Dot was a very active participant in the children's lives, whereas Wally being consistently described as cold, not really having much of a relationship with anyone. You know, basically playing the stereotypical 70s father slash man of the house figure. He would come in, say hello, entertain the conversation, proceed into the evening with a beer in his hand with the newspaper.
Yeah, I mean, I got that feeling. I have to admit, I felt like neither one of these parents really cared about their kids. It's kind of a running theme this year with the school shootings, but I think that the quote, so when I found a quote that you were talking about, and I felt like, I think I bring it up later, but I feel like it was one of those things where that was actually after Dot was interviewed and she was asked about the fact that she said she believed that Brenda was being abused mentally, physically, and sexually by her father. She had no proof, but she said that she felt like it was a thing. And in the interview, she was asked why she didn't try then to go back and get custody of Brenda. And that was when she said she couldn't afford to have that custody battle. But it's crazy to me. I mean, she was an accountant. She still lived in a middle class neighborhood. I don't understand how money comes between, or anything comes between, protecting your child if you actually care about them. From personal experience, I can tell you, you can go to court and fight for custody. You can get representation or get legal aid. It's not foreign in the United States either. If you think that your daughter is being abused, or your son for that matter, you fight for that. I just got from Dot's tone and tenor, and even when we get into after the shooting, I feel like Dot's tone and tenor really was that she didn't care that much. That's my personal opinion, anyways.
That's fair.
Further to that wonder of how much Dot wanted time with her children, it was later stated by Brenda's attorney, so of course take that with a grain of salt, that Dot had become like a stone after the divorce towards most areas of her life, especially with her children. Brenda said that Mom never went out of her way to spend time with her or with her siblings, and that she had essentially stopped attempting to build any kind of relationship, particularly with Brenda. People outside of the family, though, said that it was very clear that Brenda and Wally were closer, and that Brenda was also his favorite child. In 1976, Brenda would have another incident that took place in her young life that certainly seems to have played a large part in her future, and a larger part than anyone believed in the moment. Brenda was 14 years old at the time, and she was in a very serious bicycle accident. She ran into a telephone pole, and she hit her head incredibly hard. According to her brother Scott, Brenda blacked out after she hit that post, and she was also woozy the next day and had no recollection whatsoever of the accident. Dot said that her daughter appeared to be almost drunk and sleepy the next day, and that she had told Brenda to get Wally to take her to the hospital or to a doctor. It's been said that Wally did not want to take her, but that her sister Teresa offered to take Brenda to the doctor, but there is no definitive evidence that states that she did or did not ever see a doctor about that accident.
Later on, Brenda's family would say that she seemed fine after a couple of days, and she did not have any drastic changes in her behavior after the accident. But we know that's certainly debatable. Brenda's grades dropped significantly, her social life completely changed, and her perception and participation in activities also stopped. It was as if the old Brenda was gone, and she was searching to find out who she was again. It has been said that to anyone that was paying attention and to anyone who had any level of care for Brenda, it was very evident that she was in some kind of trouble. But like many of the cases that have been covered here on school shootings over the last month, it appears that Dot and Wally were perhaps not two people who were very perceptive to their daughter's problems and needs, whether that was on purpose or out of ignorance. In hindsight, there were significant changes within Brenda's life that seemingly could have been caused by either the divorce, by the accident, or some combination of the two that should have been recognized.
Yeah, I agree. As an aside, I wanted to mention, I didn't put it in the notes, but I'm going to say it. I've had my fair share of concussions, and I'm thankful every day that every time that I hit my head as a child, my parents took me in to get checked out, because especially now, I mean, I understand that the 1970s and even when I was a kid in the 80s and 90s are different than now. We know way more about concussions. We know way more about CTE. We know way more about brain health. But this was another one of those things. I'm going to throw more dirt on Dot here, and Wally for that matter, and say this is one of those situations where if you notice that your daughter looks drunk, or you notice that your daughter's acting woozy, or she doesn't remember the accident on the bike. I had one of those incidents as a kid where I flew off my bike and had no idea how I got home, had no idea what happened, still don't really have a lot of recollection of that accident. You need to get your kid checked out. And, Dot kind of passed the buck. Get Wally to do it. Wally was probably drinking and decided that it wasn't a priority. Hopefully Teresa took her sister, but based on findings after everything that goes down in this episode, I don't feel like it was ever done, because after Brenda is in custody, she gets checked out, and it really seems to be the first time that anyone realizes that there was brain damage done in that incident. And I guess as a parent, for me, I feel like that's not something you can let slide, even in the 1970s, in my opinion. I don't know what you think about that.
I mean, I think the running saying as a parent when anytime a child gets hurt in any way is kids will be kids. But I think that was more so the saying back then because kids fall all the time. They didn't have the safety measures, I guess, that we have now. Similar to what you said, we've learned a lot more about brains and how they work and how they need to be protected with helmets and stuff like that. So I can definitely see them thinking absolutely nothing of it and them brushing it off like it was just another scraped elbow, bloody knee, twisted ankle.
You're like love for everybody in these stories shines through. I'm such a skeptic. Like, everybody's guilty of something. And, like, you are so the polar opposite with me. And I do like it. It gives that, the benefit of the doubt that I guess I probably don't give anyone in these episodes. And I probably don't give anybody in real life. You're either black or white for me. There's no shades of gray.
But also, to that point, I mean, as we'll discuss later on through the episode, and I mentioned just previous here, Brenda did have a lust for attention. So it's quite possible that she was just, playing it up and acting drunk and acting woozy and being all, oh, woe is me, to get the attention on her, that she felt that she was neglected by her parents, because we've already discussed that they didn't seem very invested in their children overly. I'm not saying that, obviously, there's proof that the accident could have caused something, but it's also very possible that at that moment in time, she was also just an attention-seeking child. Which is why after a few days, they said there was no evidence of it. There was nothing, no changes in her personality, nothing. She was just acting out for attention potentially.
Yeah, and that's fair. That's something that I never actually, thought about with this incident, but it's very true. I mean, we're about to really get into it. Brenda was a pathological liar. So, sometimes, as kids, we're told the boy who cries wolf, right? And it's very possible that her family just thought Brenda was crying wolf again. So, you're not wrong. I'll give you the point on this one.
Thank you.
Throughout all of this, one of the activities that Brenda did keep up with was shooting with her father. It was said that it was common knowledge that Brenda was a very good shot and that she was well versed in how to load, unload, and shoot a weapon. She would go with Wally to his friend's home where she and he would target practice, mostly on pop cans. She was said to have become a bit of a ringer. Brenda started to brag at school about her gunmanship, as well as the fact that she said that she drank alcohol and she used hard drugs. Aside from the guns, it seems like a lot of what Brenda bragged about was made up, as there was no proof to the fact that she had ever used or abused drugs or alcohol. Her family even stated that Brenda was prone to throwing up if she had even one beer. Another change that happened around this time was that Brenda started to hang around almost exclusively with an 11-year-old boy who lived next door. The boy's name was Brent Fleming, and Brent was the product of a troubled home himself and a troubled family life. He was considered by many, including Wally, as a destructive boy and someone that he believed was a very bad influence on Brenda.
In 1978, 16-year-old Brenda would have her first real brush up against the law when her and Brent were caught shoplifting. Brenda claimed that at the time she was just standing outside of the store that Brent had been attempting to shoplift from, and that she was an innocent bystander who played no part. When Brent was caught by the authorities, though, he was brought out of the store, pointed at Brenda, and told them she was with him and that she was part of the theft. While Brenda completely denied that she had anything to do with that incident, she went to school and bragged about the particular shoplifting incident, as well as other shoplifting incidents that the pair had done together. It was not clear whether Brenda was in fact part of Brent's plan on this particular event, but this was the first time that she would become known to police. Brenda's second run-in with police would also come in 1978 and would take place across the street from her house at Grover Cleveland Elementary School. Reports came in that the school had been vandalized, but Brenda again said that she was not involved. Brenda said that Brent had approached her and told her to come see what he had found, which was a broken window to the school that had already been broken before she arrived. She said the door was open and the two had gone in together. Again, in this case, it's not clear whether Brenda did in fact have any part of the vandalism and the break-in at the school. There are also widely spread rumors that there were windows shot out of the school using a BB gun, which was attributed to Brenda, but there is no official mention of windows being shot out with a BB gun or a BB gun being used in any police documents or media reports at the time. Both Brenda and Brent, though, were arrested after another girl from the neighborhood ratted the two out to police.
This was one of those things. We were talking before we hit record about how Wikipedia is not a good source. When I was reading through different things, this is one of those issues with this case that became repeated so many times that it's now represented as a fact. I read so many places that a BB gun was used on the school windows, and that's why people knew that Brenda was involved. Or there were windows that were shot out, and they were pretty sure that Brenda did it because she had a BB gun. But when I looked into the actual police reports, when I looked at the actual media reports of the break-in, none of that was mentioned. And it's, again, we were talking earlier, but 1970s, so many times I find when we're researching these cases, it's like it evolves. Over time, someone says something, and then someone researches and finds that something, and they add it into their case, and then all of a sudden, as a true crime podcaster, I think you probably found this in research too with this issue. It's like, okay, well, I found it in 5 places and I didn't find it in one place. So we'll go with the 5 places because it's more there. But it's crazy how much things can morph over time, isn't it?
It really is, but also it's been very noted that police reports from back in the day weren't always done to completion. So a lot of police would just quickly draft up a report, but then later on would speak about something that they never included in their report. So also, record keeping wasn't the greatest back then. It's quite possible.
No, it's true. However, the media back then was pinpoint. So while I can say that maybe they glossed over the fact that there was a BB gun in their initial report or that there were more broken windows, I don't believe that the media would have missed that. We're about to see with this school shooting how fast the media were on this case. I don't believe for a second that the media wasn't at that school as soon as they heard about the break-in, and they would have noted all the broken windows. So that's where it comes up for me that I can't believe that it happened. I think this was a word of mouth thing that someone spread over the years and got repeated.
Although, to counter your point, is the media called every single time there's a vandalism?
Back then, yeah. Something on this level, 100%. They were on the police scanners every day because that was all they had.
Fair, but we'll see.
In the early parts of 1978, it started to really become evident to others that Brenda was in some kind of trouble mentally, as we mentioned, and a program that she had been placed in because of truancy issues at school said that Brenda needed to find a counselor because she was depressed and she was suicidal. In the wake of the 2 issues in 1978, Wally even forbade Brenda from spending time with Brent any longer, but she continued to do so behind Wally's back when he was not at home. The 2 hung out, they listened to music, and Brent played a massive part in turning Brenda's mind against the law and against police, even introducing the term pig, which was a derogatory term for police, into her vocabulary. Brenda started to be very outspoken about her hatred for the police, and she even talked openly about her desire to act out and do something that would get her noticed and get her name broadcast on television and on the radio. Brent would later say, too, that he and Brenda had even spent a lot of time concocting elaborate plans on how they would kill a random police officer. In one of those plans, he said that they would approach an officer in his patrol car at a park and then shoot him or handcuff him and take him into the restrooms where they would ultimately take his life. Another plan involved them egging an officer's car or breaking his window to entice him to chase them into the restrooms where Brenda would then kill him with an axe. Brent said that they were always planning those types of things together, but they never followed through.
In August of 1978, Brent and his family moved away, and Wally could not have been more thankful and happier. He honestly believed that removing Brent from the equation would be the best thing for Brenda. He said that Brenda's attitude changed dramatically, and by the fall of 1978, her grades had even started to improve at school. Brenda, though, still described herself to others as a radical, and when she would watch television or movies with her friends, she would actively root against the police and cheered whenever the perpetrators would kill or harm an officer. She said that she, quote, wanted to kill police and blow them all away, unquote. In 1978, a psych evaluation was arranged by her court-appointed counselor, and that evaluation would recommend that Brenda be admitted to a mental hospital for depression. But Wally refused to grant his permission for that to happen, again, failing to recognize the help that his daughter was in need of. That evaluation would lay out that Brenda had failed to talk about the future or even recognize that the future was a thing.
Dot, as per usual, in my opinion, opted to not get involved, and she instead allowed Wally to make decisions. And as he typically did, Wally swept all of the problems under a rug and failed to deal with them. Instead, he opted that Christmas to purchase his very clearly struggling daughter a Ruger 1022 semi-automatic 22 caliber rifle that had a telescopic sight on it, and he also gifted her 500 rounds of ammunition. Brenda would later say that she had asked for a radio and that she had received a rifle, but that was debunked by Teresa, her sister, who said that she had been pestering Wally for months to buy her a gun. Brenda, though, said that she believed that her father ultimately bought her the rifle because he had hoped that she would kill herself. Also, hoping that it would lift the spirits of his daughter, Wally relented and actually made arrangements for Brent to come back and visit Brenda on January 27th. The two would spend the first part of the day listening to music, and then they left the house and rode their bikes over to the girl's house that had ratted them out for the school break-in incident. They did not instigate any problems or even say anything to the girl or her family. Instead, they stood across the street and stared at them as they washed their car, cut their lawn, and did gardening. Brent would say after the fact that Brenda told him that she was going to do something really big on Monday, and he said that he did not believe her, so he hadn't told anyone. He thought that if anything, Brenda might shoot out some windows with her gun.
Wally said the rest of the weekend was normal. At some point on Sunday, Brenda even asked for his car keys to the van because she forgot some of her clothes inside. Wally said that Brenda came back into the house with her sweatshirt, some pants, and another piece of clothing that was wadded up in her hands, and she gave the keys back. That was the moment when Brenda had gone into the van and stolen boxes of ammunition from Wally, a total of about 500 rounds. On the morning of January 29th, Wally went through the typical family routine. He went to Brenda's room to wake her up for school, but she was already awake and dressed. She told him she wasn't feeling well and that she had stomach cramps and nausea from her period, something that was not uncommon for Brenda to suffer from. Wally told Brenda that she could stay home from school, and he left the house around 7 a.m. Brenda later said that she then drank alcohol and took drugs, but again, all of this was a lie and was proven by toxicology reports that were run after she was arrested. I want to reiterate, she had absolutely nothing in her system.
And then Brenda embarked on the events that would lead to and become what is recognized as the first mass school shooting in modern United States history. As mentioned, across the street from her home was Grover Cleveland Elementary School, where she had attended. The school had roughly 300 students between the grades of kindergarten and grade 6. At 8:30 a.m., the children that attended the school were just arriving, being dropped off and mingling about as they waited for the school principal, Burton Ragg, to come and open the gates for the school. Across the street, though, Brenda knew the routine, and she had her plan figured out. She smashed out 2 paned windows on the front door using the butt end of her rifle. She then took her first few shots, and she took down 3 students that were waiting outside of the school, a 9-year-old and 2 8-year-olds. Their injuries were serious, but not deadly. In fact, one of the 8-year-olds got up, and she was disoriented, but she did not understand what had happened, and she staggered towards her classroom, sat down at her desk, and was afraid to tell anyone that she was injured.
Studies have shown that when people are shot, it is not uncommon for them to be unaware initially. Sometimes they have so much adrenaline and so much shock rushing through their body that those things take over so much, and they don't even know that they've been shot until they actually see blood coming out of their wounds. That was most likely the case here. Outside of the school, students were still stunned and didn't have any idea what was going on. At first, they thought that the sounds were something else, And then when they finally realized that what they heard were gunshots, they had no idea where the gunshots were coming from, and they started to run in every different direction. Students tried to find cover anywhere they could. Some rushed into the school, others ducked behind shrubs and trees, and more ran to the parking lot in an attempt to hide behind vehicles. Unfortunately, though, most of the students continued to stand around outside in panic or confusion, and parents even continued to drop off their students at the school in the midst of this tragedy, because they believed that the sounds that they heard were pop caps, backfiring, mufflers, or small fireworks.
More shots, though, started to ring out, and students started to scream, which caused running children to turn and stop running for escape to again see what was going on. This volley of shots hit the school and hit the pavement, and one 7-year-old student who had been shot in the elbow started to walk aimlessly around in circles near the sidewalk in shock. Almost immediately after the first volley of shots, Principal Burton Ragg rushed out of his office and towards the gunfire. Burton was a World War II vet, and he therefore knew the sounds of gunfire more than almost anyone else would. When he got outside, he immediately tried to rush to the aid of the students that were on the pavement and that had been shot. He rushed towards a little girl who was lying injured on the ground, but he sadly did not make it. Brenda saw him coming and opened fire, hitting him with a bullet near his heart, and Burton went flailing backwards with his arms moving in all directions. He hit the ground right next to the bushes.
6th grade teacher Darnell Barnes watched as all of this happened, and he rushed immediately to Burton and stood over him, frozen shock, as he saw blood coming out of Burton's chest. Another volley of shots rang out, and bullets whizzed past Darnell's head, breaking the school windows behind him. Darnell then raced down the driveway in the direction of the gunfire towards the wounded student that Burton had been attempting to get to. He scooped her up in his arms and ran back into the school and carried her into a bed in the nurse's station that was on the other side of the already shattered windows. Mike Sucher, the school custodian, grabbed a blanket and rushed to Burton's side. Mr. Mike, as he was known by the kids, was retired from the Navy, and he had seen action in World War II and the Korean War. He unfolded the blanket and covered Burton up, but he was also struck with a bullet to his back that knocked him to the ground. A 6th grade student came across Mike and Burton and heard Mike tell her to call the cops, but she had no idea what was going on, and she stopped walking and stared at Mike in confusion. She snapped out of the trance when Darnell yelled at her from inside the school to run and that she was in danger. All the while, children were still being dropped off by their parents.
A 5th grader was walking and looked down at Burton near the bushes when she felt a bullet hit her in the side. A 9-year-old boy saw Mike and Burton on the ground, and he remembered thinking that they were playing some kind of game or joke, and then he felt what felt like an electric shock curse through his entire body as a bullet passed through his left shoulder and out his chest, missing his heart by only an inch. Darnell again shouted to the 9-year-old out the window, helping to guide him to the back of the school and out of the line of fire. Another 4th grade girl was then shot in the stomach and the buttocks, and she fell to the ground and started to call out for her father. A female teacher then rushed out of the school and pulled the little girl to safety inside of a classroom, as other teachers had been doing amidst volleys of fire. Many of the students had been rushed into the gymnasium, where there were walls instead of windows, and thus more protection from the active gunfire. The staff shoved everything that they could up against the windows and doors in an attempt to protect them if the shooter entered the school or shot at the windows.
At 8:45 a.m., the San Diego police finally started to arrive on scene, and initially Brenda stopped firing. As the police arrived, they noted 2 adults on the ground, and there were now 8 students that had been injured. The police had been made aware of the shooting almost immediately, but because the school was far away from the city center, it took first responders 15 minutes to arrive at the school. 28-year-old Robert Robb was the first officer on the scene, and he remembers having to maneuver his patrol car around students that were wounded and hiding in the driveway. He said that as he got out, it was eerily silent, and all he could hear was the sound of a garbage truck in the area. Officer Rob immediately rushed to Mike and Burton, and he knew immediately that they were in critical condition. He said that the scene was awful, with children down on the ground injured, blood strewn about, broken windows, casings, and other students hiding and crying everywhere. He tried to survey the situation as quickly as he could. He tried to comfort Burton while he waited for paramedics, and finally he saw an ambulance pull alongside his patrol car. When he turned back to Burton, another volley of shots started, and Officer Rob felt a bullet bounce off his bulletproof vest, and paramedics rushed to his side to help him get Burton on a gurney and into the ambulance. When they went back to Mike, though, Officer Rob felt a tingling in his right arm and hand, and he collapsed to the ground. The bullet that had struck his vest had bounced off and entered the right side of his neck. The bullet wound up being an eighth of an inch from his spine. Officer Rob would fully recover, but he never worked as a police officer again.
Finally, more officers arrived on the scene, and they knew now where the shots were coming from because more shots continued to be fired. Unfortunately, though, because of the angle on the house that Brenda was firing from, they could not fire back with any accuracy in her direction, and if they moved closer, they would be sitting ducks in her line of fire. Officer Ted Kasanak and a school security guard, though, came up with an incredible plan very quickly. Shortly after 9 a.m., the two men took the garbage truck that had been picking up garbage in the area, and they drove and parked the truck over the curb and onto the sidewalk, blocking the view of everything from Brenda. There would be more shots fired after that, but nobody else was struck, and paramedics were able to find and transport the wounded to ambulances, and everyone else was evacuated safely out the back door of the school. Everyone else was out of the building by roughly 10 after 9 a.m.
While this was going on, a writer for the San Diego Union Tribune had heard about the shooting over the police scanner and had made the decision to start calling residents that lived along Lake Atlin to see if he could get more information about the shooting. The first call that was answered happened to be Brenda. It was almost 9 a.m. and the reporter asked Brenda if she had known anything about the shooting that had happened at the school, and Brenda, rather joyfully, told the reporter that she did. She said she had actually witnessed the entire thing. The reporter thought that he had hit the mother lode for his story and started to ask more questions. He asked Brenda if she knew who had been doing the shooting or where the shooting had come from, and after taking some time to think about her response, Brenda told him that she did know who had been doing the shooting. She said that the shots had come from 6356 Lake Atlin. The reporter quickly checked his notes and realized that that was the address that he was calling. Now shook, he asked Brenda if that was her address, and she giggled and said, "Sure, who do you think did it?" and then hung up the phone.
The reporter believed, or perhaps hoped, that the girl on the other end of the line must have been joking with him, and so he called her back again. Brenda seemed more than happy to talk, and she asked if this was an official interview for the newspaper, and the reporter told Brenda that it was, and that made her ecstatic. She said, "This will really blow my dad's mind. It will flip him out." The reporter then asked her why she had been shooting, and Brenda said famously, "I don't like Mondays. This livens up the day." She then went on to say that she wanted to shoot a pig, which again is slang for a police officer, and she hung up the phone again. This timeline lined up with when Brenda had shot and injured Officer Rob. The reporter then relayed his weird conversation to another reporter, and that reporter called Brenda a little bit later. Brenda would again answer the phone, and she started to boast about the usual pathological lies that she had spewed at school. She said that she liked to get into fistfights, and she even relayed that she had just shot a police officer. She then said that she had to go because she wanted to shoot another officer. She did not, however, shoot any more shots after that conversation.
Sadly, Burton Ragg and Mike Sucher were both pronounced dead at 9:55 a.m. Burton Ragg was born on May 2nd, 1925 in Inglewood, California, and he was 53 years old at the time of his death. He was 100% devoted to the students of his school, and he had survived in World War II and was a veteran. He was married and had 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter. He was devoted to his family, and he loved gardening and even kept hens. He enjoyed camping over the weekends, and he often took trips to the desert and the mountains with his family. Mike Sucher was beloved by the students at the school who called him Mr. Mike, and he was also a World War II and Korean veteran. He was the head custodian at Grover Cleveland Elementary School. He was 56 years old at the time of his death.
From there, San Diego PD hostage negotiators P.E. Olson and Chet Thurston would take over when they arrived on Lake Atlin, and a SWAT team also took over the house next door to Brenda's and the school, and they also patched the phone lines of the home. There was, however, no sign of movement or life inside of Brenda's house. Negotiators used a bullhorn to try and get Brenda to answer the phone, to no avail. 20 SWAT team members took up position, and there were also 100 uniformed officers within the area controlling public and traffic. There were helicopters in the air, and media was, of course, everywhere, but there was no sign of Brenda, and investigators started to worry that perhaps Brenda had managed to escape. As the SWAT team prepared to shoot tear gas into the home and invade, at 12:06 p.m., Brenda finally answered the phone, 3 hours after the last shot had been fired. P.E. asked Brenda if she was okay inside of the house, and he also asked her if she needed anything. Brenda said that she wanted a Whopper from Burger King, and she was told that she could have one if she surrendered, which she said she was not going to do. Brenda also told P.E. that she could see the SWAT team and all of the officers, and that they were pissing her off. She told P.E. to call them off, and he did. He told SWAT to fall back. P.E. then tried to get Brenda to at least surrender her weapons in return for backing off SWAT, but again, Brenda refused. When P.E. asked Brenda why she had started shooting, she said it was fun, and she said it was like shooting ducks in a pond. She said that it was easy, and she enjoyed watching the victims squirm around on the ground after they had been shot. She also said that she was mad at Mr. Mike because she had always seen him ordering the children around, and so she wanted to make sure that she took care of him. She also said that she knew she had shot a pig.
P.E. tried to find out what had caused the shooting, and he asked if anything had happened recently that had made her upset enough to shoot at people. Brenda told him that she was tired of people in her life looking down at her and swearing at her. She said that her parents, her friends, and everyone had always been mean to her. P.E. then asked if Wally had ever done anything to her, but she refused to talk about him. Then she was asked if she had a message for him, and she said, "Yeah, I do. Tell my dad, go get screwed." P.E. then knew that Wally, who had been brought to the scene, would not be any help to talk Brenda down and out of the house. Police then contacted Dot, who was at work at Torrey Pines, and she told police that she couldn't come and she was working and had a desk full of money. Against her wishes, police escorted her to the scene. Brenda said that she had no message for her mom either. She didn't like her. Professor of Criminology Scott Bonds had said, Professor of Criminology Scott Bonds had said through studies that most mass shooters are often people who feel powerless in their everyday lives and that they act out trying to send a direct message to the entire world that they are angry and that they are finally done. This is why That is why in that moment that they tried to take as many lives as they can, so that their name will always be remembered. With 350 bullets fired and 2 lives taken now, 45 years have gone by. Sadly, she has succeeded in that regard. At 2 p.m., P.E. asked Brenda again to surrender, and she said that she would think about it. P.E. said that he was going to hang up the phone and call back in 20 minutes to find out her decision. When he called back, though, Brenda again refused to surrender. She said that she wanted to stay in the house and that she wanted to do more shooting. She said that she knew from television that if she fired at police, they would fire back at her. She clearly was contemplating death by cop. P.E. told Brenda that if she shot at police, it would not end well for her, but she continued to get more and more agitated. P.E. then changed his tactics, and he said that if she fired at police, the SWAT would rush with tear gas, and that would hurt her pets. That seemed to calm Brenda down finally. P.E. finally hit a soft spot.
Brenda then asked P.E. if she was on the news, and if her story was being broadcasted, and he told her that she was, and it had been broadcasted. Brenda then said that when she was arrested, she wanted to be placed in handcuffs. It's pretty clear she wanted a spectacle. Then, after 3 hours of negotiations, Brenda finally agreed to give up her weapons. She unloaded her rifle and her pellet gun as requested, and then walked out the front door. She carefully placed her weapons on the driveway and turned around and went back into the house. She then exited the house again at 3:09 p.m., and 2 SWAT members arrested her. Brenda did not resist arrest. The following day, Brenda was arraigned, and immediately the DA office urged for the courts to charge and try Brenda as an adult. She was originally charged as a juvenile, though. Wally and Dot's homes became the targets of vandalism, and they had rocks thrown at their houses. They also, of course, as we know it happens, received hate mail and death threats. Brenda's first lawyer even ultimately asked to have himself removed from the case because he was also receiving death threats. Finally, Brenda would be charged with 2 counts of murder, 8 counts of attempted murder, and 1 count of assault with a deadly weapon.
Brenda's evaluation would state that she was a young misfit who was deeply troubled by her parents' divorce and because she was living a bleak existence. Other professionals would say that Brenda showed characteristics of a schizoid personality. It was believed that she would be better off in a mental health facility rather than being incarcerated. It was also noted that Brenda had damage to her frontal lobe and lesions on her brain. She was diagnosed with front lobe epilepsy, which is a fairly common form of epilepsy where seizures originate in the front of the brain. Doctors believe that the bicycle accident had caused an undiagnosed brain injury that then led to the frontal lobe epilepsy. These seizures often happen during sleep, so it's possible that nobody ever knew that Brenda was suffering from them. Brenda's new lawyer tried to argue that she should be charged and tried as a juvenile because of her maturity and her age, so that she could get the help and rehabilitation in a youth facility until she was 23, at which time he said that she and her case could be reassessed. Those pleas failed. Brenda pled guilty to 2 counts of murder, 1 count of assault with a deadly weapon, 9 counts of attempted murder were dismissed. On April 4th, 1980, a day after she turned 18, Brenda was sentenced to concurrent terms of 25 years to life in prison.
Brenda became eligible for parole hearings in 1993, and at her first hearing she said that she hoped that police would shoot her, and that she had been a user of drugs and alcohol at the time of the crime. Again, she was lying, as results have shown that she had nothing in her system. This time, her parole was denied. In 2001, she claimed that her father had been subjecting her to beatings and sexual abuse, and of course, Wally denied those comments. The parole board chairman said that because Brenda had never told anyone about the abuse previously, he doubted that her allegations were true. Brenda said that Wally had come home angry and drunk often, and that he had yelled and swore at her and hit her often in the face and the ribs. She said that she was sexually assaulted and sodomized almost daily.
In the book, Letters from Prison, Voice of Women, Brenda said, quote, "My father had done everything a person could do to another person. The beatings, the touching, the emotional abuse. All from the one person I should have been able to trust the most and go to for safety. He was the one doing all the things you're supposed to protect your kids from. I got no help from counselors or school, no help from anyone," unquote. When asked about the physical and sexual abuse, Dot said that she had her suspicions based on how Brenda spoke and acted, but when she was asked why she did not report anything or try to get custody, Dot said that she could not afford to.
In 2005, a San Diego deputy district attorney cited an incident of self-harm from 4 years earlier at the new parole hearing. He said that when Brenda's girlfriend was released from prison, that the incident had showed that Brenda was still psychotic and that she was unfit to be released because she had cut herself. In 2009, the parole board would again refuse her application for parole, and they said that she would need to wait 10 years before she would be considered again. In August of 2022, Brenda and the parole board mutually agreed that she was not suitable at the time for another hearing, and that she would need to wait 3 more years because of this agreement. To this day, she remains imprisoned at the Californian Institute for Women in Chino, California. Her next tentative date for a parole suitability hearing is February 21st of 2025, 5 months from now. The last thing I want to mention here is that I do find it slightly bothersome personally that Brenda's complaints of sexual and physical assault at the hands of Wally were completely swept under the rug. The man passed away in 2016, but I certainly think that there is something worth investigating more there. The fact that her complaints against Wally were essentially thrown out the way that they were because she had never mentioned them before certainly rubs me the wrong way. This was exacerbated by the fact that not long after Brenda was arrested, Wally actually started a romantic relationship with and then married one of Brenda's first cellmates, a 17-year-old girl named Sheila McCoy, a girl that many said was the spitting image of his daughter, Brenda. To me, that's certainly startling, and has to at least make one wonder about the abuse that he allegedly doled out on his daughter. It was said that Sheila looked so much like Brenda that at the time neighbors started asking Wally if his daughter had been released from prison. That's crazy stuff. Brenda has now served 45 years in prison, and we all know how I feel about juvenile offenders and second chances. I feel like there was certainly chances here to recognize that some of Brenda's actions at least were predicated by circumstances that were beyond her control. Bailey, let's have a chat. Do you have anything you want to add at the end of this episode?
There's a couple things. So, for one, just a couple things don't really rub me the right way. I do completely agree that women should definitely be taken seriously when they give their allegations. I am 1,000% on board because I will believe a woman 99.9% of the time when they allege something. But the part that gets me is that no one really had any evidence of it, and no one really came forward with any concerns or anything, and the only time there was concern seemed like a last-ditch effort on Brenda's end to kind of yet again gain sympathy from people that might not fully know. Like, I'm all for people coming forward, and I'm going to get attacked here because, like, lots of people are like, some people don't feel comfortable coming out until years later. But I mean, if you know for a fact that it is going to help you, and it actually led and was part of the reason why you did this, then don't you think that that is something that should have been brought up way earlier by her?
I do agree. But you can never tell with someone's psyche. I mean, you do have to remember that when the sexual assault was allegedly happening, this was a very formative time of her life. Like, all she really had in the world was her dad. Now, I do see your point of view on bring that up to a lawyer before your trial, bring that up at the trial, bring that up when you're arrested. Um, you did say like 99.9% of the time you do have to believe someone when they come forward with allegations. Now, Brenda could be part of that 0.01% because this is someone who doubled down even at her first parole hearing on lies. There was proof very much to the contrary that she was heavily into drugs, heavily into drinking, that she was fighting in school. And these were all things that not only did she say at the time, she continued to say them at her first parole hearing, at least. So you do have to call into question what you can believe. And unfortunately, with all of the years gone by, you really have Brenda, who at this point is a convicted murderer, and you have Wally, who doesn't seem like a very upstanding human being, in my opinion. It's well publicized that he had drinking problems and he had issues. It's their word against each other. So really, where do you find the truth? Obviously, at the end of the day, I'm not saying Brenda should be released because she was sexually assaulted by her dad, because there is no evidence of that. And you certainly can't let a murderer out based on the fact that she says something happened. Obviously, her own credibility is shot at this point. The only thing that really made me err on the side of there might be facts to this is the fact that Sheila literally looked like Brenda. And we're talking about a nearly 50-year-old man who meets a 17-year-old girl in his daughter's cell and decides when she gets out to marry her. First of all, there's a massive age gap there. And second of all, it kind of speaks to the fact that if they look that similar to each other, like, he was obviously sexually attracted to his daughter. I'll make that jump. I will make that jump. I definitely can't say for sure.
That's quite possible.
What's that? Sorry?
That's quite possible.
I won't say that everything that Brenda said is true, because most things that Brenda said weren't true.
I also want to touch on the fact that it has been not only evident throughout this entire case, but evident to everyone else as well, like the parole board, that even from a young age, Brenda did all that she could to lash out, to get attention, to do something to get attention. And she can't handle emotions very well at a moment in time. Leading back to the one parole hearing where it was brought up that after her girlfriend left prison, she decided to self-harm herself. She acted out. She couldn't contain her emotions at that moment in time. And I'm not attributing that to the front lobe issue and seizures like that, because it was even said in childhood that she wanted recognition. She wanted the attention. So to me, it just seems like this was a very insecure child who literally just did everything and anything she could to get attention and get any kind of attention, whether it be negative or positive, which is why she lied so much and why everything she says has zero validity to it.
Yeah, 100%. Brenda was 43 years old, and in that cutting incident, she carved words into her arms. Like, this was not, this is not behavior of someone that is mentally fit. Um, I've been beating the drum this month and, sharing the fact that I do believe that parole needs to be an option for a juvenile offender. And in this case, it is. And this is a case where, in my opinion, Brenda should not be released back into society. Even at her last parole hearing, in, what was that, 2022, obviously Brenda said that she knew she was not suitable for another hearing. It's obvious that maybe there's some self-reflection there finally after, 50 years basically. But I have said I believe that parole should be an option. I believe that hope should be there. And this is a case where that was given. And this is a case where I 100% do back the fact that Brenda should not be given that parole unless something has drastically changed since 2022 and it's going to weigh against her when she goes for parole. That she said in 2022 that she was not fit for parole. Unless something supremely drastic has changed in 2025, she's not going to get parole. And at best, she might get paroled and put into some kind of facility where she can get help. This is a girl who was born in 1962. She's now, that's 38 years before the turn of the century. So, you're looking at a woman who's over 60. She's not fit to step into the world that's drastically changed since then. So that's my thing that I want to mention is I take some flack from listeners because I do humanize the perpetrators, and Bailey told me before the show that I humanized her here. I do think that there's something to telling the story of how someone gets to the point that they do something like this, but there certainly are plenty of cases like this one where there is rehabilitation is not possible here, in my opinion.
I don't know. I just think that from my research from the very beginning of this case until the very end of it, it has only shown a woman who has zero self control, especially because she specifically shot a student because he was wearing her favorite color. That tells me that there is nothing. She just woke up. She has the mind of a sociopath. She woke up one morning and decided, I'm going to potentially pathologically lie about my ailments that my father would have zero knowledge of because he doesn't know a female reproductive system. So who knows if she actually did suffer from migraines and painful cramps during her time of month. Who knew even if it was her time of month? Being such a pathological liar, she woke up with pure intent, and it was premeditated. You can't tell me, like she was claiming, that it was a drug-induced state. You cannot argue with me that it was a drug-induced state because she woke up, drank alcohol, smoked weed that was supposedly laced with PCP, did drugs, whatever she was claiming. She openly told her friend that she was going to do this days before. She openly admitted to multiple people of what she wants to do. And now that she's going back, she's like, I don't remember what I did. I'd really like to find the recording of me saying, I hate Mondays. This livens up the day. If anyone is a pathological liar that should not be believed, it's her, not the credible journalist who was actively on the phone with her and accurately recorded what was being said, whether it was written or vocally recorded. And she's claimed multiple times that when you're hyped up on PCP, you don't remember things and you say whatever comes to mind. If that's the case, then how come you were premeditated? How come if you say whatever comes to mind, how come you didn't mention all of the abuse that you were sustaining from your father, whether it be physical, sexual, mental? How come you never brought up any of this?
Yep, I agree with almost everything you said. But I do believe that this was a girl who did have that change. I do think that a lot of what happened and who she became did stem from that bicycle accident. Sadly, I know more about CTE than I wish I did from personal experience. And regardless of whether anything was known about it at the time or not, to me, that doesn't weigh in. Now, there is that point of Brenda's life where she had good grades. She was a good student. She loved to go to her mom's house. She spent time with the pets. And it changed. Whether that was all because of the brain injury, whether that was partially because of abuse at the hands of her father, whether that was partially because of the toxic relationship that she had with her friend, all those things come into play, and none of those things excuse her actions. Um, the only thing that I do say is I do think that there is external factors here that you can't completely disqualify. Was she a pathological liar? 100% she was. Did she premeditate this on some level? 100% she did. She got the bullets the day before out of her dad's van. Like, everything was premeditated. But I do believe that then, now, and for the rest of her life, she's not of right or sane mind. Whether that's, it doesn't matter what caused it. That's the truth. And there was a change. That's all I'm saying.
I will say that it is completely possible that the bike accident was a contributing factor. But what I'm saying mostly is that she showed all of these signs, symptoms, and warnings prior to all of this, prior to the accident. She was always a pathological liar. She was always searching for attention. She was constantly talking about things that never happened as if they did. And I'm sorry, but from the absolute beginning, she has always played the victim. I'm just standing outside of the store. I just walked over to see what was going on. So to me, playing the victim is her first go-to. So again, it makes zero sense that she never brought up the sexual allegations right away if she was playing the victim. It was her go-to card. That should have been the royal flush for her to lay out on the table. But when every single thing didn't work out her way, the only way that she could play the victim now was to blame someone who's no longer around.
Yeah, I can't disagree with you. Is there anything else?
Thank you so much.
Oh, okay, all right.
This is a great episode.
It was a good one. I think I said to you earlier this week, when we picked this case, I was like, oh, this'll be a short one compared to what we've done before. But I look at the timestamps right now and I'm like, nope, it's not. It wasn't. It was a lot of pages. It was a lot of research. And we left some things out. Things like you had brought up when we shared our notes that we left out. I chose to leave out names of students just to keep their names out of the episode. But there was so much more that we could have added to this case. And we could probably sit here all day going back and forth about different opinions and different stances on it. And I think that that's the beauty of true crime. I mean, yes, we're talking about real lives and real actions and real crimes, but there's so much discussion to be had here that I think is healthy. There's so much to learn from each and every one of these cases that we cover on GBNF, and this is proof of it. So I hope that you, the listener, comes and jumps on social media too and join the conversation. Let us know what you think. Tell us what you agree with. Tell us what you don't agree with. We can handle it.
We're very open people, and we are very open to ideas and topics as well. And if you just want an episode of me and Lance bantering at each other for an entire hour, we could easily do that.
Sad but true. All right, is there anything else that you want to add at the end?
Kids are kids. Can we not hurt them? Just in general, like you say, love your children, but like also it takes a village. So like children are innocent.
Yep, love your people. It doesn't matter where you look at any of these cases this month, whether it doesn't matter if we're talking about adults, teenagers, victims, perpetrators. Love your people, period.
And if someone is telling you there is something wrong with your child, or you see there is something wrong with your child, and there is an expressed need for them to need mental help, get them their help. Don't sweep it under the rug and leave it to someone else to deal with. There was so much neglect in this case towards Brenda that, like, yeah, as much as I don't really side with her, my heart goes out to her because multiple people were advocates for her and her own parents weren't. So be an advocate for your kids. Be an advocate for people you see who need help. If you see something, say something.
That's right. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. Saying that your child and seeing that your child or anyone in your life needs help does not make you a failure. In fact, it makes you a success if you try to get them the help that they need. Get yourself the help that you need. We live in a world where mental health struggles are rampant. So make a phone call, see a doctor, tell someone, get help for you, for your kids, for anyone in your life that needs it.
I know getting help and finding a therapist or finding a doctor is very difficult right now, but even picking up the phone to a friend, an unjudgmental person, an unbiased third party can help anyone out.
Yep. And I think that that's the best place to leave it. Don't ever be afraid to admit to someone when you need help. So, we'll wrap up another case here in our month of awful school shootings. Thank you, Bailey, again for joining the show.
Thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to coming back repeatedly and doing this with you guys and going on these adventures.
Absolutely. And for you, the listener out there, as I always do, I remind you to jump on Instagram, Facebook, X, TikTok, and most of all, Patreon. If you would like to help the show, Patreon is the best way to do that. You can join up for tiers. Every month I'm doing 1 to 2 extra Patreon episodes now that are exclusive to that platform. And also just join as a free member if you can't afford to support and jump in the conversation there. I'm trying more and more to get that going on Patreon because it's a place where maybe our conversation isn't so parented by the social media companies that we're discussing things on other platforms. And whatever platform that you're listening to this show on, please take the moment to give it a follow, give it a like, give it a 5-star rating, leave a comment, and share the podcast. We want to get this out to as many people as possible, and those are things that you can do that don't cost 1 penny. So in closing, love your people, love your kids, and don't be afraid to admit when you need help. And of course, be better. I'll see you back here next week.